Welcome back to Radio Wasteland, the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm your host, Chauncey Hullard. This is my co-host as she collects herself, Kara Kittrick.
Hi.
Kara, you got any news from the Wasteland?
Yes, I do. So, the United Arab Emirates, in the face of increasing desertification and the dwindling habitability of their country, is turning to drone-based cloud seeding to slightly improve rainfall. Other countries, including China, South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, and multiple U.S. states, have been using these techniques for years to try to make it rain more, or in some cases, like Indonesia, less. Average temperatures in Dubai regularly surpass 115 degrees, but it only rains 4 inches per year. The effectiveness of cloud seeding technologies in general has been hotly debated in the scientific community, even as they become more sophisticated. With inflation on the rise, companies have been sneakily reducing the size of many of their products, from cereal boxes to toilet paper, while maintaining the same price. Studies have shown that most consumers don't tend to notice if the size of their products shrinks slightly, and therefore their buying habits do not adjust as much as they would to a corresponding change in price. And finally, the San Francisco Chronicle recently reported on a story about a young man who made a custom AI using a free website called Project December, powered by GPT-3 technology, using text samples from his deceased ex-fiancée. The resulting computer program typed and acted in a way that was strikingly similar to the original person and was generally cogent and able to react appropriately to emotions. This conversation apparently helped this individual find the closure that he'd been seeking, even as the implications of tech that can accurately impersonate individuals remains unclear and worrying. Back to you, Chauncey.
So, using these drones, apparently this has been going on for a while. Why do you think it's just hitting the news now? I mean, I know there's probably been snippets, but it kind of hit in a big way these past couple of days.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's probably, well, for one thing, there were some just videos that came out recently of like cloud-seeded thunderstorms, basically. And also the technology has changed a little bit. Like, they've been doing more sort of traditional methods of cloud seeding involving, I want to say, silver nitrates, just sort of injected into the air, which we do, which lots of people do, farmers do it, all kinds of things. And it's of, pretty marginal effectiveness. But so they kind of moved away from that to something that's much more sophisticated and really sort of very Dubai-centric, because the problem with rainfall in Dubai is that they get lots of, well, they don't get a lot of rain, but the rain they do get, the droplets that are smaller, it's so hot they tend to evaporate before they even hit the ground. So what they do is they use drones that emit this electricity to sort of like statically condense the rain so that the rain, the droplets are larger, basically. It's not more rain, it's just the droplets are larger, and that means they reach the ground and they actually get into the water table, and therefore the water is usable, instead of just turning back to vapor and, continuing on its merry way throughout the jet stream like it normally does.
So, throughout history, I was watching some history show about trade routes and fishing on rivers, and that there were straight up wars because the fishermen would recreate the river in a way to catch the fish and then use those fish in the local economy. But the way they dammed the rivers to do it would cause a problem for the merchant flow. And I can't help, so I was talking to my wife, this is where I'm going with this. I wonder how long it'll be until we see some sort of wars based on climate. Because couldn't it be argued that as this rain falls there, it's evaporated back up, then it moves on and falls someplace else, but now it's not going to?
Yeah, so I have two answers to that. In terms of wars based on geoengineering, I don't know, that's not really clear, because the perspective is like, it's unclear how much this actually does, right? And it's certainly like pretty meager in the face of like the threats of climate change.
Sure.
In terms of wars fought over unintentional geoengineering, i.e. climate change, that's been happening for a while. The Syrian civil war largely fought because of drought, which, I mean, obviously there were other causes.
Well,
there's always other causes.
I'm talking about wars between countries that matter, you know.
Yeah, well, millions of
I'm not
refugees.
coming down on the Syrians. I'm not coming down on the Syrians, but the Syrian war doesn't necessarily have the global implications that a war between China, US, Russia, these mad grabs for, I mean, what if
maybe not, but
what if the day
millions of people
comes that all of the United States thinks like California about the climate?
Sure.
And China does not. And we say we're doing everything we can, China won't stop. It's like I'm looking at it like that.
If we go to war with China, it'll be over real quickly. So
that's true.
Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's not going to be a long drawn out thing. If two superpowers go to war, it's just going to be everyone in the world dies except for, like a couple people, and they have to pick up the pieces.
Well, a lot of people seem to be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And then, still on this topic, sticking with drones, not necessarily climate change. Did you watch the opening ceremonies of the Olympics?
I did not.
They had a wild thing above the opening ceremonies where they had 1,800 drones making a perfect sphere of the globe. And they were just flying in such intense unison that it was really quite amazing to look at. And then on the way back from Tennessee, Jake and I both on the airplane watched like Olympus Has Fallen or whatever the third movie is in that series. And there were like these drone swarms with like, and I thought that was really cool. And I figured we must have them. And then after watching the Olympics, I'm all, oh yeah, we got them.
Yeah. What's funny about this whole thing with like cloud seeding is like in the long term, the costs of doing this are of course astronomical, but also drones, the energy costs are huge. So like in terms of not making the world hotter and making the problem even worse, it's probably not efficient, right? It's like doing this is purely a short-term fix. It's just going to make it worse eventually.
Yeah, is it windy there? Couldn't they do it with balloons or some sort of gas, kind of cut on a lot of that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Dubai's thinking too much about renewable geoengineering techniques.
That's true.
Which, it would be nice if they were, but Dubai is also, it's Dubai. Like, they're more into excess.
Right. The use of energy has me thinking about, I'm getting I listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, and
sure.
And I think we talked about this a little. I was listening to a whole show about how electric cars cause more damage to the environment than anything else, but it was coming from a radio show that didn't necessarily believe that we were changing the environment. So I found it incredibly frustrating that they were just...
there's no way that's true. That's wrong.
Well, they were just throwing arguments. It was more like they were arming their listeners to fight with other people in society more so than they were talking about the news or spreading the news. The entire show felt like they were arming their lislers. Yeah, and I wonder how often that goes on the left also, because I just don't think I'm as apt to see it.
Well, yeah, I think on things that are truly the left a lot, but I think a lot of times people think of like CNN as the left, and it's not. CNN is just milquetoast and boring, and I would say they would have a liberal bias, but they also bend over backwards to like try to be neutral at all times. Whereas something like Fox News, it's like, hey, we're here, we're conservatives, screw you. Like, they are outwardly dedicated to spreading right-wing talking points, and there aren't a whole lot of equivalents like that on the left. It's mostly news outlets that are liberals, yes, but they're like news people first. So, which isn't, to say I respect their integrity. Like, they've got, there's huge problems. It's all corporate owned. It's all horrible. But, like, their goal is not to spread propaganda. Their goal is to make money. Unlike something like Breitbart, free to use, funded by billionaires. Like, I don't know that it makes any money, really. It's there to make the population more amenable to lowering the taxes of the people who pay for it,
I see.
Which is, I think, the case of most of the right-wing media ecosystem, and there's not a whole lot of equivalence on the left, MSNBC, some podcasts, but the left is way behind, frankly, on that kind of thing.
Well, if nothing else, we can all enjoy that. In 20 years, we'll laugh about this when we climb from our holes in the ground when the sun goes down and barbecue and eat a dog together that we found.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Product size reduction. I know somebody who's noticed this. My wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw this news story too. And, Terry's been talking about it for quite a while. And I think it's really shady. It's just
I love a conspiracy that's real. We got too much conspiracies. It's just wild, connect the dots, just nonsense. And this is just malicious dudes. They didn't think anyone would notice. Most people didn't. A few people did, I love that. It's easy to believe. I mean, it's obviously happening.
I love a digestible conspiracy.
You can check. But yeah, it's just real, sinister, and just, it gets you mad. So it's
now let's take this from the other side, though. From the other side, it does make sense. If cost goes up, so let's say I like ketchup. I'm actually not a big fan of ketchup, but let's pretend I do. I buy a bottle of ketchup. The cost of ketchup is going to go up. Why not make it smaller? I mean...
Well, the shady part is that our whole economy, depends on consumers acting rationally, right? And adjusting to, changes and things. Now, obviously, consumers aren't rational, which everyone except economists know. But, the whole point of this is you do this instead of, changing the price a little bit, which would be easier. And if consumers were perfectly rational, it would be the same thing. This is banking on gullibility to eke out some extra money from people who just don't notice. And that's the part that's shady. They could have chosen to just do the price. And that would have been okay, you need to cover your costs. This is huckster stuff.
No, I get you. I think a big part of the problem with this world is forcing society to live in ignorance because companies and governments don't want to deal with repercussions.
Sure.
Has led people to enjoy living in woeful ignorance. People want to be ignorant. In raising my kids, I'm a nerd. My kids were nerdy. They like nerdy stuff. They'd have friends over, and their friends would be all like, "Oh, you guys are doing nerdy stuff." And I'd just be all like, so it's cool to be stupid. It's cool to be stupid. And they'd be all, what? No. And I'm just all, but you're making fun of this other person for not being stupid. I mean, is it, I don't know. We're all going to die, Kara.
I mean, to be fair,
I have a terrible attitude. I know I need to fix it. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I was ignorant of this topic until, an hour ago when I researched it. So, I don't know. You can't, you're going to go through your day being ignorant of 99% of the things that you ought to know. And that's just the way it is, because there's only 24 hours in a day. I've lobbied for more.
Yeah. Well, yeah, me too. I need to lobby for more.
Get a 36-hour day in there, but so far the Earth and the sun stubbornly refuse to adjust their distance to make that happen. So
I think we need 30-hour days.
30-hour? Yeah, 30-hour would be nice.
Yeah, because personally, for me, I tend to be up about 18, 19 hours, and then I need a good 8 hours after that.
Sure, yeah. But actually, if there was a 30-hour day, we would just have to work like 22 hours a day.
What the hell do you think I'm doing while I'm up for that 18 hours?
Well, true. You're not working.
Actually, it's like 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. I have to admit.
You're working 18 hours a day?
Yeah, with a 15-minute break every 15 minutes.
Well, okay. So you're working 9 hours a day?
Yes, probably. Yeah. Probably more like 10. Yeah.
Making me do math on air, no less. Totally.
Doing math is lame. That's what smart people do.
It's true. No, I'm just not good at it because I'm not smart.
Okay, so a guy made himself a virtual girlfriend to get over.
It sounds like a movie,
his
right?
relationship. I want to know how long they were
to get over the person who died. To be fair, it's not like she dumped him, but
okay. How long were they dating?
I want to like a really long time. I want to say they were childhood friends. So it was
I don't know.
It was like 10 years, and then like 8 years later, he created this virtual program.
Yeah, I don't know. As a person who 5 of my family members died by the time I was 17, including my mother, I don't know if this is really the healthiest way to go about it. Now, people say, oh, it helped him move past. Yeah, sure. I mean, it helped you move past like as a ambulatory person, I could walk to the grocery store. A motorized wheelchair would help me get there, but would it really help me? Do you get what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. You think it might be a crutch, right?
Yes. I don't think that coming up with unnatural ways to deal with natural things is probably the best bet. Now, don't get me wrong. The argument can be made for medicine and so on and so forth and stuff like that. But I think we're going down the wrong path there. I mean, I would tell the audience that, the thing that helped me learn to live with people passing is loving that person and knowing that I get to experience the things that they no longer do, and it's now my job to carry that experience for them. I have a responsibility now. My responsibility is to remember my family members, is to notice the red of the flowers that they no longer get to see. Sure. These little things. I think that I think it's like breaking a bone and then setting it and letting it heal without any sort of I don't know. I think this is probably going to come back to bite us.
Well, that is almost exactly what the AI told this dude. Was like, really? Hey, I'm dead. I've been dead for a while. You need to go and live your life. Stop telling me how much you miss me. I know. But, and other people have repeated this, and, the experiences have been different, but it's deeply dystopian, isn't it?
It
is. This whole thing. And, yeah, so this is like a nice application of this tech. And I think it's the dystopian part for me is just reading this like feel-good story about how this AI helped someone. And like the whole time you're thinking, so we have AI that all you need to do is give it a text sample and then it can just be that person online and someone won't notice.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's huge and terrifying. And I'm vaguely, GPT-3 has been out for a while. It's not something that anyone can just use. It's because the processing power required is so huge. There's a waiting list and you need to pay and stuff. Actually, I'm in this collaborative art project. I know a friend who managed to, through one of their friends, get some time on GPT-3 to make like these AI generated tarot cards. Mm-hmm. And some of them were wild. some of them were just like amazingly creative. So this is an incredibly powerful technology, and the applications for making fake news, for making fake tweets from people. Well, that's already pretty easy by hand, but for making like fake chat conversations.
Right.
Like
none of this sounds good.
No, yeah, and like I'm sure you can use it for some good stuff too, but this is like a deceptive technology. Like that is its very nature. It's a sort of magic trick where it's not, the AI isn't thinking, it's just doing statistical analysis on like what should be said, and then it spits that out, right? So it is by its nature something that is designed to fool people, and turns out that has lots of implications for fooling people, which is not really what people need right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that people need to everything is politicized. Everything is politicized, but I think people need to be educated. And I don't mean that you need to be educated on social agendas and stuff like that. I mean, I think people need to not be stupid. I mean, let's pretend I am smarter than your average bear. Personally, I kind of believe that one man can do another can do for the most part.
Sure. Yeah, same.
But let's pretend that I'm smarter than the average bear. I'm no more smarter than the average person than the average person is taller than the average person. Sure, there are some really tall people and there are some really smart people, but there aren't a lot of them. Most of us are capable of having the understanding of the world that the rest of us are. And somehow we put these entire blanket terms into these political boxes. And so now we put education, learning stuff. We've put actually learning stuff into a political box. Oh, you learn stuff? It's like, if learning stuff leads to being brainwashed, we are in a very dangerous situation.
I mean, okay, I'm gonna, I guess, play devil's advocate for a moment. But I feel like most people who are like, higher education is brainwashing our kids don't have a problem with like learning stuff. It's just what their idea of learning stuff is, reading Breitbart and watching insane videos on YouTube and talk radio and stuff. Like it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same argument on both sides, right? Our source is good and your source is bad. Now, like, who's right? I mean, I think the answer to that is obvious, but obviously not everyone agrees.
Yeah, but there is a whole lot of crap in there that we can be pushing together. There is what do you mean? Mountain of knowledge that we all agree is accurate. And when you come along,
I don't know.
The Earth is round. Granted, there's a few flat earthers out there that are,
we've had people on our show who don't believe that.
Most people are going to agree that we should probably teach that the Earth is round in school.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that when you demonize terminology, especially with people who, so you got this group that you've been making less and less intelligent. You've been creating the Morlocks. The Eloi have been creating the Morlocks.
Mm-hmm.
The Morlocks is vocabulary goes down, down, down. Every time a vocabulary goes down, it means that more concepts are shoved into one box. Am I quick? Am I fast? Am I speedy? Do those mean different things? Yeah, they all have different implications. But if I only know one, they're all one. And so when you shove people down into this smaller box and then you demonize the term education, all these people in this box are going to demonize everything that has to do with education.
Okay, I mean, I see what you're saying. I don't know. I don't think there's anyone who like, yeah, I'm dumb and I love that. Like, I think people just have a different idea what the facts are. People are just living in a different reality and have a different idea about what it means to be educated. I've had people like anti-vaxxers yell at me like, you need to be educated on this topic. And it's like, no, you need to be educated because my facts come from real sources and your facts come from insane snake oil salesmen. Like, but essentially our arguments are the same. We're saying the same thing to each other, and it's all you can do is determine who's right and who's wrong. There's no way around it.
We got to call the herd.
I feel like that's your answer to everything. It's a little worrying. Someone get weapons away from this guy.
Well, here's my sci-fi.
Are you going to become a supervillain, Chauncey?
I wish.
Because I support that. You have the look.
I can't afford it. I have a cat now, too. I have a cat.
You have a cat? Oh, my God. You can totally do the cat on the lap, stroking the cat, the whole thing.
No, it is for you to die, Kara.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's my sci-fi answer to this. And I don't know if anybody's going to like it because it has to do with spending a lot of money and giving people a lot of education. If we've decided that 18 is adulthood, I feel that in every town across this country, we need to build learning institutions where any person up to the age of 18 can go there 24 hours a day and have access to teachers and learning about any topic that they want.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I would love that. But
you
know what people are saying is, the government's going to brainwash you.
Into what?
Yeah, well,
their
social agenda.
Don't vote them in again.
You and I agree on this, I think, but we'll just look at the angry comments in the Casey chat room and see what the other side is saying.
We're all going to laugh about this in 20 years when we come out of our holes in the ground after the sun went down and eat a dog we found.
Yeah.
All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. Do you want to know more about Bigfoot? Well, then stick around. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest tonight is Seth Breedlove, and our topic for tonight is On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey.
Because when you make and try this, you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know about this before.
I noticed that you have made quite a few documentaries about mysterious critters, which I was really shocked, and a lot of them I'm just, oh man, I haven't heard of these movies, and this looks like a bunch of great stuff. So I guess the question on the Bigfoot front would be, why did it take you so long to get to the main guy? A lot of these are like lesser known characters in the world of cryptids, and Bigfoot's the big guy. Did you put it off on purpose, or was it just what was presented to you?
I mean, we've been covering Bigfoot to some extent since the first movie, because Minerva Monster is kind of a Bigfoot case. But yeah, as far as like taking a look at the greater phenomenon, it took me a while to get to that point because I didn't know how to approach it in a way that hadn't been done a billion times. And it turned out like most of this stuff, like just the most straightforward kind of approach hadn't been done. And so I had, I've watched probably every Bigfoot documentary there is. And I hadn't seen one that really broke down the entire history of the phenomenon in a way that was, I guess, comparable to something like a PBS documentary, like Ken Burns. Like if this was my Ken Burns approach to Bigfoot. So the first series On the Trail of Bigfoot was really my stab at just telling the history of the subject and a little bit about like where it stands today. And then On the Trail of Bigfoot, the journey kind of picks up where that series left off and puts it in a very personal context, I guess, since it's directly about my interaction with the subject.
So, was your interest in making these movies based in a belief or curiosity? Like, did you go into these things believing that they existed, or just wanting to know more?
No, I think first and foremost, I'm a storyteller. And so I'm traditionally looking for stories that appeal to me, and stories that inspire some sort of idea about how I can relay these stories to an audience that might never have heard them before. And so I don't come at anything as a believer or a skeptic or a whatever. I just am pretty much interested in relaying a story that I find fascinating. And I think that's one of the things that sets STM apart from a lot of, Discovery Channel shows or whatever you want to talk about. Pretty much all the mainstream paranormal content is sort of geared around, swaying people to belief or non-belief. And I'm not really interested in swaying people one way or the other. I just want to tell a story. The draw for me is it definitely it revolves around, I guess, my interest in just telling stories that involve these subjects that so many people find fascinating. But I mean, I'm not in the camp that believes you have to consider cryptids or UFOs or whatever real or not real to enjoy the stories. Like they're the entire series, Small Town Monsters, was kind of built around the idea that these stories are part of the history of the areas where they take place, and that they inform the culture of those communities. And that was what originally interested me in making these movies, was to, I guess, explore how, something like a regional Bigfoot case could impact the culture of a community. And so that's the draw for me, much more than like, is Bigfoot real or not real? I mean, personally, I believe Bigfoot's real, but I could care less if my audience does.
Right. Yeah. Kara and I tend to be coming from the healthy skeptic level, pulled into this stuff just because it's
Who are
cool.
you calling healthy?
Yeah, it's just cool. It's cool to hear about,
Yeah. That's what.
But I mean, I'm open to the possibility, but Bigfoot is one of those ones that, there's a lot of arguments both ways. Half the people would say there's no way that it could exist out there and we would have found it. And the other half say it could easily exist out there and we'd never find it. In doing these things, when you get out to the wilderness, do you find that the magnitude is somewhat overwhelming?
You mean like the magnitude of where we are, or yeah? I mean, for sure. I think that's the thing that stands out. And being out where you are, you're well aware of this. But I think the magnitude of the forest itself, wilderness, whatever you want to call it, there's still plenty of isolated areas around the United States, and I think that was like the biggest takeaway from something like On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Journey, was that even in New York State, which we connect so often with New York City or Albany or some of those bigger, cities, you've got this massive forested area in upstate New York that has 6 million acres of coverage, and where something could easily stay hidden if it wanted to. And that isn't to say that alone is an argument for the existence of Bigfoot.
Sure.
But certainly when we're out there, I mean, it is kind of eye-opening to discover how much land there is where there aren't people roaming all over the place or crawling on top of each other.
I'm curious. You mentioned a second ago you were interested in sort of the way that a cryptid case or a Bigfoot case sort of impacts a community. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about that. I can't think of a whole lot of examples, but also don't know the topic super well. One thing I think of is like Point Pleasant and Mothman. It's really big there. They have the whole festival and everything. But what's like some examples of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can impact a community in a lot of different ways, and beyond. Point Pleasant's probably the best example, honestly, because you've got this city that actually embraced the story, mm-hmm. and they knew how to turn it into tourism, right? Like they knew how to turn it into a tourism boon. They embraced it to a level that most small towns do not. But what beyond that, what fascinates me is when towns don't do that. Like when towns want nothing to do with their local monster. Minerva Monster, the first movie we made, it took a look at a town that pretty much didn't want anything to do with the Minerva monster, and it had done everything they could for the last 30-some, 40-some years to just write it off and move on from it. And still that creature, that character, and that case is probably what that town is best known for.
Put that cookie down! Now!
There's so many different ways that a regional monster case and regional folklore can impact the local community. And if the community knows what's good for it in the current state of the world, they will hopefully embrace those stories because, they are a big draw for a lot of people. I mean, most of the communities we go to are more well-known for their local legend than they are anything else. So you've got Adams, Tennessee, where the Bell Witch was. I mean, people know Adams because of the Bell Witch. There's Elkhorn, Wisconsin, where the Beast of Bray Road. It's the same story.
Yeah.
People don't know Minerva because they have a giant dairy cow in the middle of the center of town. It's that, they had a cool Bigfoot story connected with it back in the 70s. So there's a lot of different ways those communities can be affected, and hopefully can use that to their advantage.
Kara and I are from a town. We've both moved away since we started Radio Wasteland, but we started it in the town of Redding, California. And it turns out that like 30 years ago, Redding was offered a university, and they turned it down. And we look at it now and we go like, oh, why would you do this? I mean, the amount of income that would have been brought to the area from a university is just insane. Why turn it down? And a lot of it is this sort of like refusal to change. And I think a lot of smaller areas are scared of the big change. They're not necessarily scared of being the people with the Bigfoot story. They're scared of the people that are going to come, I think.
Yeah, I think I see that in small towns, regardless of whether it's about the paranormal or not. Sure. Anyone from outside can be a reason to bristle for some people, especially older generations. The entire town of Louisiana, Missouri, where the Momo case took place. I mean, those people to this day want nothing to do with that story, but when you sort of inquire about why, it has more to do with the fact that they don't want outsiders coming into their town.
Oh, that's interesting.
Than it does with the fact that they don't want to be associated with a Bigfoot story. It's more about.
So it's not that, kooky paranormal thing. We don't want that. They just, don't look at us. We don't
for that particular town, town for sure. But it's different I have been in communities where it seemed like the bulk of people didn't want anything to do with it because they don't want to be the Bigfoot town, or they don't want to be the ghost hunting town, things like that.
Right.
I always say that I don't like to make comparisons to pop culture when we're dealing with these things, yet I always do it. So
you do that every episode.
I do it every episode, apparently. What I think about when I think about this is I think about the Blair Witch, and I know that was fake, but here's an example. And I think about them going around to these towns and asking these locals and yelling over the fence going, tell us what you know about the Blair Witch. Is this what your experience is like? Are you chasing down locals that don't want to talk to you? Does that happen on the reg?
No, it isn't, because we have such a short period of time. Like, it's funny you would ask that, because we just finished recording our own podcast where we actually talked about that for a while. We have such a short amount of time to work on one of these productions that everything is done well in advance. So as far as like walking up to trying to get man on the street interviews and stuff like that, it just doesn't happen. So I think we probably deal with that to some extent during the run up to filming the movie, where you're, cold calling people or emailing people or whatever. But as far as like once we're in town, we are not actively trying to find those people. Having said that, that doesn't mean those people won't come running up to us to let us know that whatever we're there covering doesn't exist. People love, like, we can be at the Mothman festival every year surrounded by like 15,000 people and some maniac will come running up to my booth and scream, Mothman isn't real, he's a demon, and run away. Like,
there's
like
always the nut job with the Jesus sign who's telling you that you're going to burn in hell on the street corner with his portable PA. You know, I would take my kids to the anime conventions, and even at the anime conventions where these kids are basically watching cartoons and having fun, there's some crazy Jesus guy out there telling them they're all going to HE double hockey sticks, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I love that though, because Mothman isn't real and he's a demon. Like,
right.
Yeah. Well, we run into the demon thing, you know, quite often. A lot of people will tell us that Bigfoot's a demon, or this. I mean, everything that seems to be the blanket response for any paranormal topic is it's a demon.
Well, that's a good question then. As a believer in Bigfoot, what do you think Bigfoot is? Because there's a lot of different views, obviously. There's a demon or a trick. There's intergalactic gold miner or an animal.
I mean, I love all those. Yeah, my personal opinion, and my opinion is formed on the evidence that it already exists, that we know about, the years of sighting reports, you know, behavioral characteristics that are recounted by people that claim to have seen Bigfoot. All of that seems to point to some sort of undiscovered primate. The way it behaves, the way in which it acts. That's my personal opinion on what Bigfoot is, if it exists. I think that's where the evidence that exists leads us, and that's not just from, like, you know, 21st century, late 20th century accounts. We have reports going all the way back to the 1800s of creatures that seem to at least bear similarities to what we consider Bigfoot today. And this thing's been behaving the same way, you know, since the 1800s. So either it's a really cool coordinated hoax, or there's something out in the woods that behaves in a very specific way.
Right.
yeah, it would almost be like stranger and more fantastic if there was like a secret society of Bigfoot hoaxers that had been around for 250 years or something.
Yeah, there's a quote by Grover Krantz that I don't know how it goes exactly, but he says something to the effect of, like, when forget it. I can't remember what the quote is, but it was almost exactly what you just said. Like, the idea of a hoax is so absurd that even though it seems more likely, it just doesn't line up. Like, it doesn't work out. There can't be hundreds, if not thousands, of people coordinating this hoax over, you know, a couple hundred years. At the same time, why don't we have a body? Why don't we have photographic evidence? All that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Intergalactic gold hustler. That's why.
Around, go work on Starbase 80.
Damn, Starbase 80?
And I think about it a lot when driving. Because if you think about the amount of people that are on the road and driving and doing what I'm doing, which is listening, futzing with the radio or whatever, you'd think that there would just be tons upon tons of wrecks, like statistically way more than we have. But, you know, humans are a little more predictable. You know, to go out of your way to create a hoax, you're right, it does end up being something that is really kind of rare that people actually do. And when we find them, we're always kind of like, wasn't there one not too long ago of people like taking a deer in a Bigfoot costume and shoving it in a freezer?
Yeah, the Georgia freezer hoax. Actually, Steve Calls, who's in the Journey movie, he's one of the guys that busted that hoax attempt. But yeah, the Georgia freezer hoax, which would have been around like 2001, 2002, I want to say, maybe a little later in the 2000s. But
yeah, these first grade, so relatively recent.
Yeah, you remember that. No, these two guys, basically stuffed a Bigfoot costume with a bunch of meat and then put it in a freezer and claimed it was a Bigfoot and tried to, I mean, they successfully gained a lot of attention. It's interesting. Sure. I don't feel like we get those same like large scale hoaxes that we used to have as much anymore. I don't know if people just have better stuff to do with their time, or if they're, there's so much awful crap happening in the world on a daily basis that they don't want to go out in a suit and get shot or whatever. But yeah, it seems like in the last couple, like maybe last decade, there's just less of that kind of hoaxing, like mainstream kind of hoaxing that gets a lot of attention.
That's such a bizarre way to do it, because like, if anyone looks at it, they're going to be like, how interesting that, Bigfoot has like hair that's made out of polyester fibers and the body is just full of cold cuts,
Yeah.
Like that's not what I would have expected scientifically.
Salami falling out of the arm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally. Bigfoot, turns out, eats a ton of nitrates. Right.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, so as you can tell, I'm a multitude of nerds. I got a pretty nerdy question. I'm not sure who's going to care about the answer, but I want to know. You said that when you set out, you plan all this ahead. How does that work? You say you're cold calling people. Obviously, there's some research that goes on. So you get a name and you start with that name, and then you start asking them who they can talk to, who you can talk to, and build it out from one story. And it's all on the phone first before you get there.
So in the last 3 years now, we have a researcher at STM, Heather, and she helps me with a lot of that kind of stuff. But that is a big part of what we do. I mean, we basically will come up with like, what is the topic of the movie? And then I start thinking creatively about how the movie is going to go, what kind of people we're looking for. And then I'll kind of talk to her about that. And then she starts tracking those people down through whatever nefarious means she's using to find these people. I know when I was doing it, I did it all the ways you would expect a creep to do it, which is you'd find them on Facebook talking about stuff, and then you would reach out to them that way, or you would look them, like you'll read names. If people are talked about in sort of any kind of news media, you'll find their name that way, and then you just look them up and contact them. The other thing I think that we have a lot is like a lot of people will contact us ahead of time, and they will say, I have a story, like if you're ever doing a story here, get in touch with me. And then you get in touch with them. And then I guess the other way is that over the years, I've been doing this now for about 6 years. So you build relationships with people. And then, I meet probably thousands of people each year. And in that time, you meet a lot of people who claim to have experiences who want to talk. And obviously there's a whole other set of parameters that comes with vetting these people and trying to figure out who's telling you the truth and who isn't. But that's a part of this job that can't really be understated, is just the sheer amount of time and effort that goes into finding the people that you're going to interview. Because at the end of the day, your typical paranormal TV show has a very different end game in mind than Small Town Monsters does. Like our end game is really to tell a great story, to document the history of these cases, and to put it out as a movie that people will enjoy. And I think most TV shows just, what's the scariest thing we can make this person say?
Sensationalism.
What's the scariest thing we can get this person to say so we can make a really insane recreation to put in our TV show?
Yeah, so the shows always make it seem like this is the show that's going to show us the indisputable evidence. This is going to be a great sales pitch for the movie. Is there any indisputable evidence in there?
No. No, I mean, I think it's a movie about something a lot bigger than that. And I think we've got movies with evidence. The first On the Trail of Bigfoot has video of, eye shine in the woods. We've got some really fascinating sounds and that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, that stuff might open someone's mind to this stuff a little bit, but anymore, anything can be faked and hoaxed. And I think people watch this stuff knowing that. So no matter what you show them or what kind of sounds you give them to listen to, they kind of have they're predisposed to think one way or the other. And so this was a movie about, things that are not typically associated with the Bigfoot subject, like the healing power of nature and getting out and experiencing, the world around you and the natural world around you. And, the camaraderie that grows between people that get into these subjects that most people can consider weird. There's a lot more going on with the movie than just, can we convince people Bigfoot's real? Because I'm not fully convinced Bigfoot's real.
Right.
So I'm hoping
people's story, I assume.
Right. And if the story, or if the filmmaking experience, if something happens during that filmmaking to convince me that Bigfoot's real, then hopefully the audience gets to go along on that part of the journey as well. But that did not take place on this shoot, and I still think there's plenty in the movie to make people stop and question, the possibility that maybe these things are out there. You've got multiple eyewitness stories in the movie. You've got, a couple interesting sounds, things like that. But I think I've always felt like eyewitness stories are the most compelling evidence for the existence of Bigfoot anyway, because evidence can be hoaxed. And when you're watching, 15 different people give their story and that you can hear them tell it in their own way, I think there's something much more believable about that.
Turkey, now we might lose.
Hold on there.
Flint!
Will yelling at Billy help?
Not really.
Look, if you want to play your best, you got to play like a team.
Yeah, Red! It's tied up!
The next time you get angry over a bad play, remember you need teamwork to win, not arguments.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!